Have you ever sat in a room at work, in your community, or even in your own life and thought, I probably shouldn't say something, not because you didn't have a thought, but because you weren't sure if it mattered or if it would be heard? Today's conversation is about that voice, the one you've been negotiating with your entire life. And what happens when you stop asking permission and just start using it? Welcome back to the latest episode of the Write Your Own Story podcast. I'm your host, Betsy Leonidas, and I am so thrilled to be here with Sarah Jakle, the founder of Democrashe. This conversation is for the woman who quietly questions, do I really have anything worth saying? Is anyone actually going to listen? We're not trying to turn her into a politician. We're helping her trust that her voice belongs anywhere decisions are being made. Have you ever sat in a room at work, in your community, or even in your own life and thought, I probably shouldn't say something, not because you didn't have a thought, but because you weren't sure if it mattered or if it would be heard? Today's conversation is about that voice, the one you've been negotiating with your entire life. And what happens when you stop asking permission and just start using it? So welcome back to the Write Your Own Story podcast, the podcast where we have honest conversations about what it really looks like to build a life that feels like yours and that you're so excited to live it, you almost can't believe it. And today's episode is for the woman who has something to say, but isn't quite saying it yet. So I'm sitting down with Sarah, the founder of Democrashe, who is doing powerful work helping women, especially young women, step into spaces where decisions are made. But what I love about this conversation is it's not really all about politics. It's about courage. It's about identity. And it's about learning how to trust your voice before you need the world to start validating it. So if you've ever felt like speaking up wouldn't change anything, but deep down you still want to be heard, stay until the end because we're going to show you exactly how this shift happens. Sarah, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm so excited to hear your point of view.
Thank you, Betsy, for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so I like to start every episode off with this concept of like, okay, if I take in everything that you have to share today, what could actually change in my life?
In Democrashe, we call the voice you're talking about the inner critic. And we all have her. And there are a lot of evolutionary reasons why we all have her. And what we do in Democrashe is shift that voice. We gently acknowledge it for trying to help, and we shift it to our inner best friend. And so if the amazing listeners get anything out of it, I hope they will personally meet their inner best friend and learn how to call on her to encourage her to do all the things you said, which is speak up when it feels scary, speak up when you feel like you might not be heard, and speaking up when you know your voice matters, even though it's outside your comfort zone. What would our world look like if women really spoke up?
I have goosebumps head to toe. I love that so much. And, you know, I think we all know what it feels like to have that inner critic. She talks so loud and so fast, and she's like a freight train, right? But I love the idea of tapping in and shifting it to, she also, if she has thoughts to be that powerful in a negative way, what if she could be positive? Oh, I 100%. Love that so much. I love that so much. Okay. So take me back. Kind of what was the moment where you feel like your voice didn't belong? How did you get to here?
Yeah, so I had a dramatic, my voice didn't belong, because I was diagnosed in 2014 when I was working as a social worker with an autoimmune disease called psoriatic arthritis, which is a pretty nasty autoimmune disease. And the pain and fatigue were so overwhelming that I was told by a very kind rheumatologist that I would never work again.
Oh my gosh.
And I would live at home on my couch with my puppy dog Max, and my voice really no longer belonged, right? I had been counted out. And I am academic and stubborn, Betsy.
I love it.
So I really stuck in. I had been I had a master's in social work and in military social work to truly see how you overcome adversity. And I really delved into how does our brain work? What do we do with suffering? How do brains overcome extreme adversity? And turned all of those into practices. So when the election of 2016 happened, I was like, I am not sitting this out. I am getting up. And I had all of that work that I used to start taking steps forward. and eventually did so much of that work that I became a national outreach director for voter registration and the Get Out the Vote director for the California National Organization for Women, and saw there what women went through when they stepped up in civic and elected spaces, and thought, I have trained my whole life with the skills to overcome adversity. What if we trained high school girls with those skills and tied it to stepping up and using their voice and speaking out exactly as you were saying, writing their own stories in civic and elected spaces? Not only what would those women's lives look like, but what would our democracy look like if women had those skills? So it was actually the act of not belonging anymore, of being counted out, of being told I would never work again, that was the catalyst for the skills I now teach in Democrashe.
Am I just going to spend this whole episode with goosebumps because I was hanging on to every word and I absolutely love everything you said. There's something to when you're told or you deeply feel that you no longer belong, that requires a shedding of your old self. That, I don't know, in my personal experience, I would love to hear if this is something similar to you. It is the biggest blessing in my life because I was forced to shed an old being to find, to kind of like write my own rules and figure out like, okay, how am I going to come up from here? I'm at the bottom. And without knowing, starting to shed those things that made me feel like I didn't belong. I'm like, well, if I don't belong, then I need to make a new space where I do belong. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I think, one of the things we teach in Democrashe that I pulled from my experience is called the power of and, where we switch the word but to the word and. So we can hold multiple things at the same time. And yes. I would say I wouldn't wish trauma on my worst enemy. And there is a unique thing called traumatic growth that is only possible after going through adversity. And both those things are true. We don't wish suffering, right, on anyone. Right. And there are unique lessons and growth that happen from the experience of suffering. So I feel like I would hold both at the same time.
My best friend and I say to each other all the time, two things can be true. Two very juxtaposing things can be true. And it's just like to be able to step away from that sort of black and white thinking into accepting the gray area and that multiple things can be true. I can only imagine how that translates into obviously sort of the healing that you have in finding your voice, but then also in your mission as well. But I think that is really incredible. The power of and. I like that.
I would say to your amazing listeners, when they're thinking of stepping up and using their voice, we often say to ourselves, I'm excited, but nervous. Yeah. And when we hear the but, our brain thinks there's a problem, right? But is a signal that something is wrong. And if we just shift that to, I'm excited and nervous. I am both. Yeah. It actually helps us hold the nervousness along with the excitement and makes it more likely that we will step up and use our voice because we're not using the but to talk ourselves out of it. So it's a very simple shift, but it's very powerful.
I love that. I'm going to add that to my repertoire. My repertoire is of one. Of my kind of like red flag word for me is should. Not saying that it's like a hard no, but it is a very strong moment for me to pause and then just go inward and be like, I should, why? Because society tells me to, because I've been conditioned this way, because I think that's how it should be done. Is that true for me? But and taking a look at that and be like, are we signaling ourselves something that's true? Or is this an opportunity for, like you said, excitement or whatever the other side of and is? I love that so much. So when you are, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also love you bringing up should. I remember coming out of social work school, and I don't know if you've heard this, but the saying was, you can should all over yourself.
Amazing.
And just as a line to be aware when we're using the word should, because it is a flag that maybe that's something we should interrogate.
Oh, I'm obsessed with this. This is so good. Okay. So can we go back to a minute where you're sick and feeling, so overwrought with pain and exhaustion, and you were told to basically like go home and give up. And what was kind of that moment where you were like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I have to choose something else. Like, how did you get into forward motion when I'm sure you felt just in like quicksand?
I think it was realizing that it might be that the only thing I had control over was who I was going to be in this moment. I didn't have any control over the pain. I didn't have control over the fatigue. I didn't have control over getting put on disability, but I had a control over who I was and how I was going to meet this moment. So truly, when I started doing a deep dive into the brain and the different modalities that help with suffering, I didn't have any expectation of getting back up. I thought that was off the table. But I did think the only choice I have is who I want to be and how I want to meet this moment. And I got really into the self-compassion research of Dr. Kristen Neff of how to talk to yourself with compassion and meet pain and suffering with compassion rather than the very natural anger and frustration that we feel, but that ends up attacking yourself. You become in. And so once I found that, and also I started getting really into mindfulness and all the different modalities from psychology that help with suffering, just to think of who could I be? How do I want to show up to myself, to my husband, whose wife had suddenly been put on disability, to my friends, to my family. And that was kind of the moment when I thought I have control over one thing, but that thing is important to me. And that's when I started the deep dive into the brain, because I really wanted to see there has been so many amazing humans who have thought about how we cope with suffering. So many amazing humans who have had it much worse than me and been lights in this world, and studying them and studying how they approach the world and the mind and thinking of who we are, I knew that there was a chance to learn from them. And it was interesting because, you get so caught up in career, and it isn't necessarily until you're forced to pause that you really start thinking deeply into these concepts. And one of the reasons I wanted to start teaching these things in high school is because in my experience, we don't encounter them until we're truly in suffering.
Yes.
And then we're forced to.
Yes.
But what if high school girls just had it? What if we just gave it to them and they didn't have to go through that process? So that's kind of the moment. That was the moment. Who can I be? How do I want to show up?
There's something so, when I appreciate you saying, two things can be true, right? I have such empathy for the suffering that you were going through, but I think it helps to be able to know that you are not the only sufferer. And so what can you put in your control? Because so often we just need some sort of progress to feel like, okay, I do, when you feel like life is just happening to you, which is a horrible feeling. And so many things, as you mentioned, are out of our control. But I love that you're like, who am I going to be in this moment? How am I going to show up? How am I going to feel? That's the only thing I have control of. And I think that is such an empowering message to women. That is sort of like the base layer to finding your voice, because your voice is how you show up. So I absolutely love that so much. And I think, as you said, I would not wish suffering on anyone. But it is a perspective that we never ask for, but can often be a great tool in our life moving forward. But I love the concept of teaching these girls at a young age so that they don't have to go through the suffering. I call it, like, I often refer to it as like the now what moment, like life, the rug has been pulled, or life has slowly dwindled to a place where you don't recognize yourself anymore, can't see your options anymore. And it's that now what moment. And how incredible would it be for these young women to have the tools and like a playbook or an outline of that now what moment, to be like, okay, I can go back to my training. I can have a reference point. So you can just start to grasp at a little sense of control. And that's, how you slowly find your confidence. Because isn't it I find it so tricky that confidence doesn't come first. You don't know if you're going to be able to do it. Wouldn't that be grand if it was like, oh yeah, no, I like confidence comes from experience. And when you're in this situation of a brand new experience, you're like, well, where do I pull my confidence from? You just have to put a foot out.
You know, you exactly said what I was about to say. You just have to put a foot out. I think when we think about big changes and, you know, coming back from illness or using your voice, it can be overwhelming to contemplate. And I think it really is breaking it down into manageable steps. When I did start getting back out, when the election happened and I wanted to try to show up, when I thought I'm going to go register a voter, that was overwhelming. And I was immediately like, I can't do that. I am in way too much pain and fatigue. So I ended up saying, I'm going to get in the car. I'm just going to get in the car and then I can get back out. If I get in the car and that's too much, I will get back out. And then when I was in the car, I would say, I'll just drive there. And that's all I'm responsible for. And I can drive home. And you truly mean it, right? I'll just register one voter. And you keep breaking it down into these tiny, manageable steps and encourage yourself just to take a step. And then if you need to step back, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But the next time you might take 2 steps. And it truly, if I had thought, if the Sarah who was on the couch after the election results, who thought, I want to do something, I basically thought, I'll try one thing and then go back to the couch for the rest of my life. And I took so many, I'll just get in the cars, that I did like become a national outreach director, running 4 teams who were doing voter registration and speaking all around about it, getting people excited about participating in our democracy, or working with amazing women as the Get Out the Vote director to make sure women's voices were heard. Both of those things were beyond my wildest dreams, but it was just one I'll get in the car at a time.
It feels like it's your best friend sitting next to you being like, you know what? Let's just get in the car. Let's just get in the car and see how that feels. So like you said, turning that inner voice into your inner best friend. And okay, my next question is, how did your body feel? Like how did this one compassionate step towards yourself and towards your goal in front of the other, how did that help heal your body?
So, I don't know that it helped heal my body, but what it did do was heal and shift my relationship with my body.
Ooh.
So as we are on this call with your amazing listeners, like I am in a tremendous amount of pain and fatigue. That never shifts. However, my relationship to the pain and fatigue shifts. And I see it more gently and with compassion. And when my body says, as my body will say, you can't sit up and do this interview, you are exhausted, I say, I hear you.
Yeah.
I totally value that and I hear you. And we'll just open the call.
Yeah.
Betsy is lovely. You are excited to talk to her. We'll just join the call. And that's all we have to do. It's just one step at a time, right? And the inner best friend came out of the work of how I can talk to myself differently, because the inner critic panics and says, you can't do this. This is too hard. And I did develop this concept of having an inner best friend. And my first inner best friend, actually, when I was trying to get up in 2016, was Barack Obama, who is just kind and warm and supportive. And I would say, what would Barack Obama say? And he inevitably was like, it's one step at a time. We just try it. There's a better country out there. We fight for her. Right. And my puppy dog, Max, was my other inner best friend, who's unconditionally loving and supportive. Even if you have to come home, I love you.
Yes.
And it turned into this concept of who is your inner best friend? Who is that figure, either actually in your life or someone you admire that you want to turn to as that inner cheerleader who has your back and can encourage you? For the girls, it's Taylor Swift, it's Michelle Obama, right? It's all these different figures, their mom, their grandma. But it's an easier actually to access an ally than try to shift the inner critic on your own, because she doesn't really shift, right? But if you can hack it by finding an ally, that voice you can hear.
That's incredible. I have never thought of it that way. I often am like, okay, how would I speak to my daughter? I need to speak to myself that way. But I love the idea of like personifying it with someone that you would just love to have as a best friend or already exists as a best friend. It takes like the pressure and the ownership off of you, and it's almost like you can lean on that person. That is absolutely fascinating. Okay. And I so appreciate your honesty to be honest, I am still exhausted and in pain. And that my best friend is a widow. She's like, I'm still a widow today, tomorrow, the next day. But I've risen and moving forward. And then, I think that to be able to hold space for both is empowering and liberating, and I don't know, a lot of words. So that is really, I love that. And I really appreciate that perspective. So I think, it sounds like I was trying to think of like a more linear way to break down like what is happening externally versus what is happening internally. But life doesn't fit into boxes like that. Right. And so I think about you just putting one foot out the door, one foot in the car, the key in the ignition, just going to drive there, see how that feels. And then on the inside, finding that compassion and that confidence and that strength from being able to do things that give you purpose and serve and help community. It sounds like, kind of how did it get from putting one foot out the door and getting in the car to now all of the things that you do?
Incrementally. I think sometimes
that's so important for women to hear, guys.
Yeah.
Increment. The fastest way to get somewhere is slowly.
Exactly. And I think it is tiny choices that you can only usually see in retrospect led you very specifically down a path.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I had no expectation when I first showed up to register a voter that I would do anything other than sit back down.
Yeah.
But it was each day making a different decision. There's a great book called The Upward Spiral, which is actually about depression. But his point is that it is tiny decisions you make that contribute to this spiral that starts moving upward, and it feeds in on itself. Every time you show yourself you can do something in these tiny ways, you get more confident about doing it again. And you wire into your brain that you are capable. So the first, I'm just going to get into the car and register a voter. People ask me to, MC the opening of clubs and things. And my immediate response was, no, I can't do that. But I started shifting everything to yes. I started just making myself say yes and trusting that if I jumped off the cliff, I could land, because I had these little success victories along the way. And so when I was first asked to start a voter registration organization with an organizer I had worked with, my first thought was, no, I can't do that. I have been told I would never work again. So I said yes. And that led to starting the organization, building 4 teams, registering all these voters, getting recruited by the California National Organization for Women. I think all of those were things that I was just staying in the moment and shifting to yes, to test something that I didn't trust yet, right? Using your voice is not about waiting until you are sure you have it. It is about learning the skills like an inner best friend. Before someone said, I'd love to have you be the get out the vote director, I checked with my inner best friend who said, I know you want to say no. I believe in you. I think you can do this, right? It's having a bit of a toolbox so that after 2020, I was like, I want to put all of this together. The civic engagement, the running for office, the resiliency skills. I want to put this all together for girls. I'm going to found a nonprofit in COVID. And I want to pay our students because so many early political pipeline opportunities are unpaid, which means only people who can afford that can do them. So if we truly want our country to reflect all of our radiant people, we need to lower barriers to entry. So people were like, you've lost your mind. You're starting a nonprofit in COVID. You want to pay your students. And I was like, maybe. but we take it a step at a time. You know, we build a team of high school and college girls to dream this with me. We'd launch our first workshop, and now it's 5 years later and we've served 1,600 girls in 42 states. And, you know, again, if you told January 2021 Sarah, she wouldn't have believed you, but she didn't need to, because she just needed to take one more step, you know?
That is so the ticket. And I don't know about you, this is not a tested theory, but I have these moments now in my life where when I look around, and to your point, you're like, everyone's like, you're kind of crazy, or like, this looks nothing like how anyone else would do it. I'm like, I'm in the right spot. I'm in the right spot, because this is designed by me, for me, to serve, you know, greater whatever. But like, there's something to like being, again, maybe it comes with the confidence of saying yes and taking those little steps to be brave enough to stand, to like build a new room, not even stand in a room where no one is. You're like, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to build a new room or something to that effect. But I think that is such a cool moment where you're like, I'm going to do everything that people pretty much said don't do, because this feels true to me. And that's all that matters.
It is. And I think one of the concepts we talk about in Democrashe, because we're talking to the girls about running for office. And if you go to my website, you can read something I wrote called What's Your Victory? Because I wanted girls to know that if you run for office, if you found a nonprofit, if you do all these things, it is not just the binary success failure model. There are so many victories that come along the way, even if you lose.
Yes.
Even if it doesn't work, you inspire somebody coming up behind you, you change the narrative, you affect one life. There are so many ways. I think we often have a very binary view of success. I either succeeded or I failed. And the question I want girls to ask is, what was my victory? Because there's always victory, and it could be small, it could be big, it could be meaningful only to you, but there's always a victory. And I think understanding that, kind of, we were talking about but to and holding multiple things, that there are so many possible victories. It's not just the one that society tells us we can have, and they can be very personal. And I love asking girls and women that question when they are trying something or dreaming something. What is your victory?
God, it's so good. It's absolutely so good. And it's stacking those daily victories. Like I used to, when, you know, I felt like I was really pushing water uphill, I would have to make a list of things that I was proud of myself for that day, because I wouldn't let myself see it, because I had such an antiquated view, to your point, of what success was. I was either there or I wasn't. But like, it is built over a lifetime, and the definition of success changes. And I really, really appreciate that perspective. So let's say my sweet Adeline walks in high school, and she gets the opportunity to work with in your workshops and within your work. What kind of things is she going to experience?
So your lovely Adeline, who I would love to meet.
Oh, I would love that.
There are a couple of ways to engage. There's a 10-week program for 2 hours a week. There's a 1-day intensive, and there is, for free, actually, on our website, the whole curriculum led by high school girls. Because what your Adeline would find when she joined is that it's a peer-led organization. Our girls go through the program and come back and lead it. So it's high school girls leading high school girls. She would learn a lot of very practical civics education, how to advocate for issues, how to get involved in your local community. She would change her name to Congresswoman and co-sponsor bills in Democrashe Congress. She would cheer her sisters on for what they're already doing in their schools and community, because we take very seriously women lifting women and building a sisterhood. And she would learn to notice when the inner critic is coming in. For example, we have the girls give campaign speeches. Before we do, we say, if there are any nerves in the room, can you put a heart on the screen? Because we're an online program. And the whole screen lights up with hearts.
Totally.
So we say, right, we feel like we're the only one. This is where we get stuck in shame. We think we're the only one who's nervous and everyone else has got it together. But we see everybody's nervous. This is so normal. So we're going to make a campaign speech. That's a big jump. Can we type in the chat what your inner critic would say about this? And the chat fills up with, my voice doesn't matter. I'm going to make a mistake. No one listens to me. And we again say, right, this is so normal. Yeah. And one of the skills the girls learn is called thank you, brain. Thank you, brain. I appreciate that you are chiming in and trying to protect me, but I'm going to go over here toward my authentic ambition. So we say, what would your inner best friend say about you giving this campaign speech? And it lights up with like, my voice is important. My experience matters. I have a right to be heard. And then the girls give the campaign speech. So we train the young women before they're going to do something nerve-wracking to like ground with Mother Earth, which settles the body very somatically. You come back into your body to check with what inner best friend would say and actually scaffold some tools to support courage and being brave and stepping out of your comfort zone. It a little bit drives me crazy when people are like, you can do it.
Totally.
And so we want our girls to wire, and they start doing it before tests, before driver's ed, before applying to college, before giving a speech, before talking to dad, right? Ground and check with inner best friend. And there are other skills too, but it's those kinds of things. We want them to truly have a toolbox that they have with them for the rest of their lives, not just in civic and elected spaces, but in any space where they want to use their voice.
Oh, I mean, what an incredible, right. Exactly. Like it isn't just for civic and elected spaces. These are life skills that every girl should have access to. I love that. So I have goosebumps again to think about these girls and to just continue to practice. Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm going to choose a different path and I'm going to go talk to my best friend about it. And I'm going to ground myself before I do it so I can actually hear her. And then I'm going to step into it. I think about the moments where, I'm giving presentations and speeches and all the things. And like, it's also so tricky because nervous and excited feel the same in your body. So you're like, which one is it? And like, the fear voice in you is like, I think it's nervous. And like, you have to remind yourself that you are safe and that, no matter what, it's all going to be wonderful and you're going to have impact and you're going to, enjoy yourself. And I think that is just so incredible. And for someone who is looking around the climate of the world right now and is feeling so overwhelmed and just wants everyone and everything to feel better, but is like, I'm just a one voice, and is it even heard? And does my vote even count? What would you say to that woman who is feeling so buried right now in a tricky, tricky landscape?
I would say, first of all, you're not doing anything wrong. This is your body, your nervous system responds to this kinds of triggers by getting overwhelmed and exhausted. I would say first, I'd love to teach you one of our Democrashe skills called savoring. Because sometimes, Betsy, we feel like if we let ourselves feel beauty or joy, we are betraying people who are suffering.
Oh, wow.
And when there's so much suffering, we can feel like, how dare I feel any happiness? And I just want your listeners to know that the research shows allowing yourself to feel moments of beauty and joy actually protects the brain and makes it more likely that you will respond to suffering and you will do something about suffering because you don't go underwater. So one of the skills we teach to do this is called savoring. And it is asking your brain to consciously notice moments of beauty and joy. And we will say to Democrashe girls, can you show me something in your room that is bringing you joy? Because the more moments we accumulate for our brain, the more it builds us up to take action. And I would say when we think about our one vote or our one voice, we forget that we are on a team of millions of people.
Yeah.
Millions of people. And I do come out of training with Organizing for Action, Barack Obama's organization, and he was a community organizer first and foremost. And he had a step up, step back model that I have taken with me into my entire organizing experience at Democrashe, which means sometimes your teammates get overwhelmed or have life experiences and they need to step back. And that is when we as teammates step up. And sometimes our lives get overwhelming and we have things come up and we have to step back and we trust our teammates to step up. None of us are alone. We are all on a gigantic team.
Oh, God, isn't that incredible? And it's beyond true, and we forget, we feel so responsible for so many things, and the bar feels impossibly high in all sorts of categories of life. But we are meant to be of community, and we are in community, and to know, and like, truly, someone said this to me because I have a, I just watched a reel yesterday. It was like, would you rather ask for help or vacuum the desert? And I'm like, vacuum. I am forever a work in progress on that. But someone explained it to me once, and I do slow up and think about this a lot, that if you're denying someone the opportunity to feel good, because nothing feels better than being able to help someone. We all know how it feels to help someone. Rising tides lift all boats. And so it is okay to take pause and step back and ask and lean on community and say, I need a break or whatever it may be, and to ask for help.
100%. And then I think the flip side of that is to excitedly wait for the time your teammate needs to step back. And how do you help?
Yes.
Isn't that, it's because I take your point completely. It really is about being in community, whether it's millions of teammates, whether it's in a dog rescue, whether it's in a mom group, it is about being in community. And I do think these human moments of helping each other is again what builds the strength in the brain to look outward and see how we can help our larger community or our larger country. It's the same thing as taking the tiny steps of just get in the car.
Yeah.
Can I pick up Betsy to take her? Turns into slowly. Can I participate in our democracy? Is there a way for me to reach out and help? Can I show up at a homeless shelter? What is it that I can do? But these tiny, tiny steps we take toward helping our friends and our community members allows us the confidence and courage to take bigger steps.
I love that so much. This notion of, and when it's my turn to raise my hand and say, I need to pause for a second, and someone, steps up, and then of course, vice versa. I'm just going to take a quick loop real quick. When I was thinking about how you just continued to say yes, even though you're deeply exhausted, how have you, and I think about women, whether they are in this space where they're trying to make a difference in the political climate of our world, or if they are just trying to write the next chapter in their own life, whatever it may look like, and they're deeply exhausted, but they want to make progress. How do you check in with yourself to know this is the right yes, or my body genuinely needs rest?
That is authentically a difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
Because in my case, it always defaults to no. So it's more being so gentle and loving with the body or with the fatigue or with the pain, and seeing if we can encourage it to show up in some way. And then the other thing is, it's really important, Betsy, to celebrate yourself when you do tiny things. Again, the research shows that celebrating your actions actually wires it into your brain and makes it more likely for you to do it again.
I love that.
So I think it is being gentle, it is taking small steps, and it is celebrating. And then sometimes I check in and to ask if I can take the small step, and I physically can't. I physically need to lie down. And thank goodness our phone is a computer, right? So I can work on my phone on the couch. But we gently ask and see if we can just show up and try. And if the answer is no, we value that and validate it.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you for clarifying that, because I think, so many of us are conditioned to push, and then we push to the point of nervous system exhaustion. And it's just finding that balance of the dance of like when to go and when to rest. But I love the idea of just checking in and asking if it can do it, or if not, what else does it really need rest, or does it just need some compassion, or whatever that may be. Thank you for clarifying that. And I love that. And again, that brings such compassion to those around us. If you can show that kind of compassion to yourself, that opens up a world of compassion that you can show to your community. And that kind of community engagement and involvement in any setting is what really continues to fuel us as humans. So I think that that is like a beautiful sort of full circle kind of moment.
Kristen Neff, who's a researcher on self-compassion, found
Mhm.
that the more self-compassion you do, the more compassion you feel toward others, exactly to your point, Betsy. And I think sometimes people can misconstrue self-compassion as indulgent,
Mm.
right? Or taking losing their edge.
Mm.
And I just want to share that again, I keep saying the research shows, but I
I
love
love
research
research.
based.
I
I
love
love
research.
research.
Yeah.
But the research shows you are actually more likely to achieve your goal if you address yourself with self compassion as opposed to the inner critic. You are going to be a higher achiever and more likely to take action on behalf of things you care about. And also, it grows compassion toward others. So rather than becoming this self indulgent, reflexive situation, it actually widens the people in your world that you feel compassion toward. So it's a really powerful way to engage yourself. And I do think inner best friend is something I would love to redirect your listeners toward, because it's very hard to just say be self-compassionate, right? If the voice is a critic, just telling the voice to become compassionate, it is not effective. Letting the inner critic know you hear her and you love her, and you're going to check in with a different voice and making it very specific, this ally of the inner best friend, is a way to shift over to a compassionate voice that actually tracks.
God, that makes so much sense, right? I mean, your inner critic is lost in deep thought and, swirling thought, but to ask someone else to lighten the load in your mind, that is so beautiful. When I think about the women who, we've talked about it sort of in the political landscape, but also just in their life are feeling, whether it be at work or at home or, in their community, are feeling not heard comes to mind. And maybe they're not heard because they haven't spoken out, because they haven't used their voice, because they just assume they're not going to be heard. What's your advice to her?
My first piece of advice is to validate her. She is not crazy. It's so interesting, the different things you learn when you start tracking women in spaces. But for example, high achieving women receive 76% of them receive negative feedback. Guess how many high performing men get negative feedback?
Yeah, like none.
2%. And I just made balloons. And I just made balloons. And women candidates get 10 times more harassment and bullying, up to 10 times more harassment and bullying than men. So I would say to her, I see you. It is authentically harder for a woman to use her voice. She gets very different pushback from men who use their voices, that are socialized to speak up and be confident and try and fail and try again. And I would wonder if she could feel her feet on the floor and notice the support of Mother Earth, our very first feminist, who has her back and is ground, and you never have to ask. She is always there. And to check in with that inner bestie. What would she say to you about using your voice? And I would remember the what's your victory concept, right? You may not get heard in this moment. However, you may model to another woman using your voice, and the next time she speaks up, she's going to get heard. And then she's creating a room where the next time you speak up, you get heard. You are never not seen by other women when you are speaking up. You are always inspiring somebody to be brave and bold, even if you are shut down in this moment. And that's part of the team that we're on. Women are a team, and you are fighting for all women every time you challenge yourself to speak up. And you are breaking glass ceilings for them, and you are supporting them. And then I would also authentically check in with yourself. And if this doesn't feel like a safe space for you to use your voice, okay. You don't need to push yourself into things that feel uncomfortable because we challenge ourselves. And then I would also say, but wait for the moment where it feels like maybe you're pushing yourself out of the comfort zone a little bit, and be brave.
God, that is an absolute mic drop moment. I I'm obsessed with everything about it. I would love to just end on that note. We talked about in the beginning that if you are feeling like you have a voice and you want to be heard, to hang into the end of this episode, to be able to learn how to step into your power and to use your voice. And I think we have absolutely done that. We have talked about shifting from your inner critic to finding your inner best friend, to call on her to speak up, the power of being compassionate, both internally and the reverb effect of externally, the power of community. And even if you are brave in just the next step, the monumental impact that has on you internally and anyone who's watching, anyone who comes behind you, anyone who even came before you. You are continuing that wave of movement. And I'm so grateful for all the work that you do. I'm so happy for you that you were able to get to this place despite that horrible diagnosis, and just told to go sit on the couch, and what you've done for your life and how the people that I am so fortunate to interview, the happiest people that I speak with and the most fulfilled people are those who are doing things that are of a natural gift and curiosity to themselves. And then also who have lived and learned something and turn around and help the next person behind them. And I think you are such an incredible example of that with everything that you've created. And thank you for prioritizing young women, and real, not only, of course, identifying the opportunity, but really investing in their heart and in, their ability to make a better life for themselves. It's just incredible. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Betsy. And thank you for creating this space.
Yeah, absolutely. It is truly my honor. And I thought, I hope with this episode that we were able to show women that life can look one way, but you have the absolute power and autonomy to turn the page and to start writing the next chapter. And it just takes one word after the next, and unequivocally, something is going to shake you again in the middle of your writing, right? I mean, we know this to be true. It's not just, it's like once you figure out that you're brave, it's all roses and progress from there. Life comes at you again, but it's learning these skills that give you the confidence to be able to say, I can handle this. If I need a beat for a minute, or if I've been through this before and now it's no big deal, whatever it may be, the self-confidence to know that you can handle it and keep going, or pause and identify those moments where you need to pause and reflect before you can keep going. Those are skills like you're teaching these young girls that are going to last a lifetime.
Thank you, Betsy. That is the dream.
Indeed, right? That's the dream. All right, you guys, if we are so inspired by the work that you are doing, which I have no doubt that everyone listening absolutely is, how can we connect with the work that you do?
Yeah, so our website is democrashe.org. So like the word democracy, but Democrashe.
Love it.
And then I would love your listeners to find me on LinkedIn. If they have any thoughts, advice, people I should meet, I would love to hear from them.
Absolutely. You guys go find her. We will link everything in the show notes. Sarah, thank you again so much for your time. And everyone, thank you so much for listening. And we'll catch you next time.